Assalamualaikum guys. So now that we finished the categories of water, we'll move on to the next chapter, which is on the topic of najasah. So in this video, I'll be talking about two things. The first, what is najasah and the ideas behind najasah. And second, I'm going to talk about the types of najasah that is present in Fiqh Manhaji or the Shafi'i school of thought. So before I move on, what is najasah? So in the previous video, I've referenced the word najasah. So najasah simply means something that is impure, or more specifically, an element that inhibits your ability to perform your prayers or your salah. So there's four things that you need to take note of before we delve further into this topic. The first, it is important for us to know the types of a najasah, because in order for us to perform our salah and purify ourselves, we need to ensure that we are free from these kinds of najasah. So if we find any kinds of this najasah on our clothes or in our surroundings, we need to wash our clothes or change our clothes first and wash our surroundings first before we can perform our salah. Secondly, knowing the types of najasah is also good for us to know what is permissible and what is prohibited for us to consume in Islam. So, if an item is a najasah, the general idea is that that item or that element is prohibited for us to consume. Thirdly, the idea that something is a najasah is only if there is a verse in the Quran or the Sunnah that directs us to conclude that that item is a najasah or not. So the default is everything is pure in Islam. However, when the Quran describes something as a kind of najasah, or if the Prophet ﷺ tells the companions to wash away something or clean something before they perform their salah, then it is from these instances that we know what is najasah and what isn't. Fourthly, it is also important to take note of exceptions. In many cases, there are exceptions to the types and categories of najasah. So it is good for us to take note of these exceptions as we delve further into the topic. On to the second part of this video. What are the types of najasah in fiqh or in the Shafi'i school of thought? So from Fiqh Manhaji, the types of najasah can be categorized into 7 types. Number 1, any consumable liquid intoxicants or alcoholic beverages. So this includes your wine, your vodka, your sake, or any intoxicating liquid variants out there. Now, there are 2 things I would like to mention in this type of najasah. Number 1, what about hand sanitizers or perfumes with alcohol in them? The chapter or the topic of alcohol is a khilaf issue. However, the differences of opinion generally exist on 2 levels, especially with regards to this issue. The first difference is if alcohol in and of itself as an element is a najasah, or is the verse in the Quran describing al-khamr as a najasah referring to the act of intoxicating oneself via the means of alcohol. And the second khilaf is in the manufacture, whether there is a difference within alcohol fermented for recreational consumption and alcohol, the alcohol chemical compound itself that is synthetically produced for means other than consumption. The general view in the Shafi'i school of thought is that alcohol manufactured for recreational consumption for intoxicating purposes is a form of najasah. However, if it is manufactured for other than recreational consumption or for intoxicating purposes, for example in your perfumes or your hand sanitizers, or if the alcohol compound itself is manufactured or produced for medicinal reasons, then it is in nature tahir and okay for us to use. Now, the second thing I want to mention in this type of najasah is what about vinegar that is manufactured through wine? So here, the scholars term the process as istihala. So when the wine undergoes oxidization, it undergoes certain chemical changes, changing its qualities and losing its najasah element. So when a wine changes to become vinegar, that vinegar is in nature tahir or pure. The second type of najasah is pigs and dogs, or more specifically the saliva of a dog. So in the Shafi'i school of thought, they view pigs and dogs as a form of najasah. And not only that, they view it as a heavier form of najasah called al-mughalladha, which has a heavier and thorough process of cleaning and purifying. but that is for another video, inshallah. So the third type of najasah are corpses, and this refers to animals that has died or have been slaughtered in a non-Sharia compliant manner. And this also includes animals that has been sacrificed by other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Here there are two exceptions to the rule. The first exception are human beings. This is because the regard for human dignity is perceived as different as compared to animals in Islam. Islam puts human beings on a higher pedestal as compared to animals based on the verse in the Quran, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. So in life and death, a human is not considered as a form of najasah and will follow a different set of ruling. The second exception are fishes and insects. So in Islam, there is no need to slaughter fishes and insects, and the corpses or dead fishes and insects are technically pure and therefore halal for us to consume, provided they are not venomous. So the fourth type of najasah is blood in its liquid form or any kind of bodily matter that is flowing out from your body, such as pus. If your clothing is stained from blood of a corpse, or if you have a gaping wound, then you have to address these first before you perform your salah. However, there are also exceptions here. The first are livers and spleens. This is because there is a clear hadith that specifically describes these two blood-related organs as pure. The second exception is if the blood is a small or an insignificant amount, or if it is something that is beyond your control. For example, if you've just performed your surgery and the blood still flows, then these are instances whereby the amount of blood is forgiven in fiqh. The fifth type of najasah is any bodily waste material or excrement coming out from a human or an animal. So any kind of urination or defecation from humans or animal is a form of najasah in Shafi'i school of thought. Now here you may ask, what about birds' droppings or chicken droppings? Here there is a khilaf. There are some schools of thoughts that makes a distinction between animals that are halal to be eaten and those that are not. These schools of thoughts that draws these distinctions view that the excrement or the defecation from animals that are halal to be eaten, for example chickens, cows, goats, camels, are not forms of najasah and are just dirt. However, the Shafi'i school of thought takes a more stringent approach on this issue and deems any defecation or excrement coming from a human or an animal a form of najasah and should be cleaned before we perform our salah. So the sixth type of najasah is any dismembered articles coming from a living animal. So if the leg of a cow or the tail of a cow gets cut off, the ruling over that dismembered article follows that of a corpse. However, the feathers or the furs or any body parts that has no blood flowing from an animal that is permissible for us to eat are an exception to this rule. So the wool from a sheep or the feathers from a duck or a goose, even if it got dismembered from the living animal, are not forms of najasah and can be used in our daily life. Now, what if we are engaging with animal hide or leather? And do we have to draw a distinction between animals that has been slaughtered in a Sharia compliant manner and those that have not? Now, there is a khilaf over this issue. However, the general view is that the Shafi'i school of thought believes or views that the process of tanning itself is a kind of purifying that item. So the hide of an animal or leather itself is pure after it undergoes tanning, and it is okay for us to use the animal hide in our salah, irregardless of whether the animal died through the means of slaughter or not. The seventh is the milk or any derivative that comes from an animal that is not halal for us to eat, such as a donkey or a pig. So the idea is that if the meat of a donkey or a pig is not halal for us to eat, so is the milk or any derivative coming from the animal itself and is therefore a najasah. On a final note, this topic of najasah is a particularly extensive topic in fiqh and involves many khilafs amongst the scholars. However, the Shafi'i school of thought, especially through fiqh manhaji, summarizes najasah into these 7 types. So if you've ever heard of any forms of elements that may be considered as najasah, such as this, then these are the opinions of the other schools of thoughts out there, and meant for discussion in another video, inshallah. So that is all for my video, and if you found any inaccuracies or more clarification that can be done in my explanation, you can leave a comment in the comment section down below. If not, I hope this video has benefited you, and don't forget to click like and subscribe and watch out for my next video. Thank you guys.